So we will begin in 2-3 minutes. Um, Hi, I'm Aarti. I'm the TA for the course for the live sessions. And so last week's content is already uploaded. I had uploaded it just a few hours after the class. And I think there's still some time left for the assignment from this week to be submitted. So I cannot share the solution for the assignment for week 1 or week 2, but we will continue with our format of um, discussing other questions and clearing your doubts, if any. So it's 6 o'clock. I think it's almost time. I'll just take a few minutes to allow you to go over any questions if you have from the content for week 1 and week 2. So if there are any questions, please feel free to either type them into the chat box, or you can also post it into the discussion forum. There were 2 questions on the discussion forum. I will answer those 2 questions. I don't know. I don't think those people have joined actually who asked the question. But anyway, I'll answer it anyway. So okay. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, please go ahead. There's actually just one question I was typing in, but it's fine. We can just leave out that. So you can always unmute yourself and speak if you want to ask a question or something. Okay, there's no issue with that. So first things first, if anybody has any question from week 1 and week 2 content, the conceptual questions, please go ahead. I think it's better if I answer those first before I start discussing other questions and things like that. Also, I hope you guys have seen that the link for um, the this week's, every week's content and everything, and the live session videos, all of that has been updated on the Swayam portal now. So that link is updated. The YouTube link for the previous week's live session, and the link where I'm posting my slides and class notes. I've just put it in the chat window as well, so you can check it out. So week 1 has all the content for whatever was discussed in the last week. And after the session, I will post the lecture slides. Sorry, not lecture slides, the question, the questions which are in the slides for week 2. So, okay, let's start with this week's questions. Okay, so somebody is saying that they have not watched this week's content. So that will be a disadvantage for you. But I will encourage you to still, follow whatever we're discussing in the class. It may be able to help anyway. So we'll first go to week 1 and see if anybody has any doubts from week 1. And also I had given a question last week for everybody to do as a practice question. I wanted to know if anybody has finished that, and if anybody had a problem with doing that. Question 6 I had given as homework. from previous session. So, okay, let me share the slide for previous week's question. I hope you can see my screen. Yes, I think you can see my screen now. So, yes, this was the question, and this is a very important question. I left it out last week because I wanted to continue this discussion in this week. We will be continuing our discussion on consumer and producer surplus. So if you have not solved this question last week, or if you could not solve it, or you didn't see the question at all, or whatever reason, I would ask you to please solve it now and tell me what your answer is. And then we'll discuss it in the class. And then I'll answer some question, the very small questions on the chat, which some people asked. Not chat, sorry, the group discussion. Okay, somebody has solved it. So I'm just giving you 2-3 minutes. It's not going to take very long. Just 2-3 minutes to solve this question, which I had given last week. And tell me, you can either raise your hand when you have solved it, or you can just type in your answer in the chat. And we'll discuss it in just 2-3 minutes. Just take some time to think over it. If you don't get it, mention it on chat and we'll discuss it. Done? So I've just asked everybody to solve this question, which I had discussed last time. Just for those of you who have only just joined in, I'm just giving you 2-3 minutes to solve this question if you've not already solved it. Because some people were not there in the class last time, maybe they didn't see it, whatever reason. Okay. So okay. Let me know when you want me to solve it, when you're done with it. Just type it in the chat box that you have finished it, and I'll get started. Okay, so let's solve this question. Let me share my screen from my iPad. Okay. I don't know why my screen is not getting shared. All right. I think you can see my screen now. Okay, nobody typed anything in the chat box, so I'm not sure what that means. I'm guessing it means that you have not been successful solving it. So, what does the question say? The question is saying that at the Bangalore airport, there are shops which sell tea, right? So, a consumer who is at the Bangalore airport is willing to pay up till rupees 30 for a cup of tea. Okay. And we have a certain equation which is given as Q is equal to 60 plus 0.5y minus 3p, where Q is the market demand for cups of tea in thousands per month. Y is what? It's the average income of a typical, consumer there at the Bangalore airport. And you have this curve which explains the relation between the quantity demanded and the price of tea, of one cup of tea at the airport. Now, they have given the information that in the month of February, it is found or it is estimated that Y is 80, which is, what was Y? The average income of buyers in thousands of rupees. And Q is found to be 40. 40 is the number of cups. So let's plug this into the equation and see what happens, right? So this is the equation. I hope you can still see my screen. Yeah. Again, my handwriting is not the best in the world out there. So please bear with me if my handwriting is not easy to understand for you. But if you're not able to understand something I have written, please do ask me. You can just type it into the chat box or something and tell me that you're having trouble reading what I've written. Okay. Because there's only so much I can do to improve my handwriting at this point of time. Okay, so Q is given as 40, and this is our equation 0.5 into 80 minus 3p. Right now, what do? We solve for p. 60 plus 40 minus 40. P is equal to 60 by 3 is equal to 20. So price is what? Price is 20, right? Does everybody agree that the price of one cup of tea is going to be 20? Yes, no, maybe? See, I said this last time also, and I'm just saying this for everybody's benefit that this is a tutorial class after all. So to get the most out of this class, it will be best if you actually participate and engage in the class, right? If I have to solve, I can anyway solve this on my own. That's what I do basically. But if something is not very obvious to you, please do speak up. Okay, let's make this a little bit separate. Okay, somebody has replied finally, thank God. Okay, this is, don't worry about being right and wrong so much. I'm more worried about everybody understanding what is happening in the class. Okay, the purpose of this class is that you understand the concepts which have been discussed in the lectures and again rediscussed in the in the classes, the tutorial classes. So now that we know that price is 20, so P is equal to 20, right? So what is given to us? Let me share the question again, but the screen will get all messed up. It's fine. I'll just read it out. So we know that the maximum willingness to pay for a cup of tea is 30, right? Let me just rewrite that here. Or let's remove this, everything is in rupees only. What is WTP? Well, WTP is short for willingness to pay. You'll find this in many places in the world of economics. The short form WTP is referring to willingness to pay. Let me write this here also. Okay, so what is, I mean, the answer is now basically on the screen. What is consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is the difference between the value that a consumer derives from a product versus the price the person has to pay. So say suppose I buy a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and my personal valuation of that cup of tea is say 50 rupees, right? I mean, I'm willing to pay up till 50 rupees for a cup of coffee because I'm so sleepy, I'm so tired. I really need that cup of coffee, right? So I'm willing to pay if, I mean, if there is a seller there and there is only one seller there and he's selling it for 50 rupees, I will buy, right? That is my personal valuation, right? But it so happens that that cup of coffee is not 50 rupees, it's actually 20 rupees. So I'm obviously going to buy it. But what is my surplus? Surplus means what is the extra value which I have derived from it. That is in this hypothetical example which I just made up, if I'm willing to pay 50 rupees for a cup of coffee and there is one shop which is selling it for 20 rupees, my personal surplus, consumer surplus is 30 rupees, right? Now, in this particular example, what is it? Consumer surplus is maximum willingness to pay minus P is equal to 30. Okay, my handwriting is not that pretty here. 30 minus 20 is equal to 10. So consumer surplus is 10 in this question. But this rationale, this logic of how we arrive at it is important. I'm not saying the answer is not important, but I'm just saying that you should get very used to this kind of logic because we'll be using it again actually in, let me show the whole screen for those who may have just joined. So if you are you know comfortable with this thinking, with this rationale, you will not have any problem in the producer surplus. But if you're not so comfortable with this thinking, you will have a little bit of problem with the producer surplus. So if you are having any issues, you're not okay with it, please tell me right now so I can explain it once again. Okay, so somebody said consumer surplus is 200. So I'm not sure how you got that number of 200. So if you want, please tell me where you made a mistake and I can help you understand your mistake. Remember, this is a demand equation, demand curve. Q is equal to 60 plus 0.5y minus 3p is the demand curve. Okay, you got it? Okay. No, but it was somebody. Okay, you are the same person. Okay, great. If you got it, it's perfect. All right. So if this is comfortable, then we will come back to this in a few minutes. We'll be solving a similar question for producer surplus. And then we will come back to this question. But before we do that, somebody had asked a question from week 1. Let me go back to that question. Okay, she had asked a question, I think, from the lecture slides. It's not from the tutorial slides. So this is week 1, the market demand. This is the question she had asked on market demand. Okay, so it's a very small minor question, but I'll just read it out. So she's saying that there was, okay, I don't have the original. Yeah, okay, I think it's here. So there was an example which I think Professor Vimal discusses in the class. This Q1 is equal to 10 minus 2.5p, and Q2 is equal to 25 minus 7.5p. Okay, and we draw this okay, why is this upside down? We draw this curve. So, okay. Something like this. Okay, I'm not drawing it perfectly, but I'm in the hope that you will understand what is really happening here. So this is Q, this is P. Now, at what price is Q equal to 0 in equation 1? We need to find that first. So in equation 1, Q1 is equal to 0 implies P is equal to 4, right? In equation 2, Q2 equal to 0 implies 25 by 7.5. Doesn't seem right. Okay, some people are, I think, logging in and logging off. Just give me a moment, please. This equation is wrong somewhere. It won't be 4 otherwise. Actually, I don't have the lecture video in front of me, so I don't know how she
So
got this.
Q1 is 15 minus 5p, Q2 is 10 minus 2.5p.
Yeah, that's okay. Sorry. Thank you. Q1 is 15 minus?
15 minus 5p
Okay,
and Q2
yeah.
is 10 minus 2.5p. Aggregate is 25 minus 7.5p.
Right. Okay, that's the aggregate, I guess. Yeah, she didn't write the other equation actually, so I wasn't sure how she got this value. All right, thanks for helping with that. So this is the example which Professor Vimal took in the class. So, okay, this will be. So I hope this is at least a little bit clear to people that, you know, this is one curve and this is the other curve. Here, for Q is for this curve, this is what Q2, right? This is Q2, or you can just call this as demand curve. You can call this as D2. You can call this as D1. So for D2, after price equal to 3, the second person, the second curve is not going to be having any value other than 0, right? If the price rises above 3 in this region, say suppose this region, the value of Q2 is 0. That much does everybody agree with me, because we're talking about deriving market demand by horizontal summation, but we're also talking about what happens when Q becomes 0. So in this region, Q2 is going to be 0 for, because what is happening in this region, price is greater than 3, right? So in this region, her basic question is that we are saying that if P is less than 3, or it's less than equal to 3, Q is equal to Q1 plus Q2. We just take a horizontal summation. So you get what? 25 minus 7.5p, right? That's the, let's call this as QM, market demand. If, oops, It's visible, right, to everybody? Okay. If P is less than or equal to 4 and greater than or equal to 3, Qm is equal to only Q1, which implies Qm is equal to, there's the equation, 10.2.5 P. And if P is greater than or equal to 4, Qm is equal to 0. So this is, does everybody agree with this so far? Let me zoom out so the whole thing is visible. So does everyone agree with this calculation so far? I'll just explain it once again, what we have done here. So we had two demand functions, two demand curves, and we evaluate for what value of price is demand 0, right? We're talking about demand here. We've not come to supply yet. So we are checking at what price the customer or consumer switches from demanding something to 0, right? So here for price 3, up till price 3, the demand is, something, it's like, here very close to 3, something, it's very low demand, but it is positive that they're buying something, assuming it's a continuous curve. And this is the point at which demand becomes 0. After 3, for the second demand curve, there is no demand. For this first demand curve, after 4, the same thing happens. The demand is 0 after 4. So let's put this in some other color, right? So after 4, Q1 is also 0 and Q2 is also 0. It's just both are 0 after this, right? But what happens between the two price quantities? So below 3, it's a horizontal sum of both the curves. Okay, so we agreed. I don't know exactly if I'm drawing it correctly, but it will be something, it's a different line, but something like this. Okay, it's not a straight line. Let me try to make it straighter. Okay, so this is maybe something like what the demand curve might look at price less than 3. Okay, between, this is the whole thing. Yeah, let me just make this a little more obvious. See, drawing all this freehand is a bit difficult. Okay, right? So before, this is not straight actually, just give me, please. Okay, some people keep logging in and logging out, so I think I'll remove that, admitting the whole thing. So anyway, so below 3, you have a certain demand curve. Above 3, oh, I'm just erasing it for now because the graph starts to look very, very cluttered if I draw the whole thing. But after that, what happens? You switch from both the curves to this curve. Oops, what did I do? Yeah, so this becomes the demand curve. Okay, and after that, this becomes the demand curve. No, it's not very neat and tidy, but I think you are sort of understanding the purpose of this whole exercise. Okay. Now, what she's saying is that I'm just re-explaining all of this, although I explained it last time because we did it in the end, and I think some people were not very clear about it. So she's saying at P equal to 3, we are saying it is this also and this also. How is that possible? At P is equal to 3, we are also saying Qm is equal to Q1 plus Q2 and Qm is equal to Q1 because we are putting equal to sign in both the places. So how can that be true? And there's a very simple answer for this. At P is equal to yes. Okay, at P is equal to 3, what happens to Q2? Q2 is equal to 0, right? So if we write Qm is equal to Q1 plus Q2 is equal to Q1, it's both the same thing, right? Because Q2 is anyway 0. So you can say Q1 is equal to Qm is equal to Q1 plus Q2, or you can say Qm is equal to Q1, right? Does that make sense? And similarly, at P is equal to 4, Q2 is equal to 0 and Q1 is equal to 0. So if I say Qm is equal to Q1 or I say Qm is equal to 0, they're both the same things because Q1 itself is 0, right? So this is the question somebody had asked in the discussion forum. I just thought I'll answer it here because it's an important concept, and although this is just a technicality, but I think not everybody was completely okay with the market demand. So is this whole concept of market demand and how you derive the curve, is this okay with everybody now? Any questions? If there are no questions, then let me enable screen share from both. Yeah, okay. So what I'll do is now I'll share the questions for week 2 on this screen, and let's pray it works. Right. Okay. So now, are you guys able to see both the screens, or are you seeing only one screen?
Only one.
Okay, that should not have happened. It should be both the screens. Just give me a moment. I'm trying to see what is wrong. Okay, it should be both the screens, but okay, somebody is saying they are seeing both the screens. So I don't know. Are you? This to me is showing that it is sharing both, but I can't see my own screen. That's the problem. Okay, if you're seeing both the screens, can you just raise your hand?
Only one screen.
One screen. All right. Okay, never mind. So we'll just switch it from here. Okay. So all right, I'll just share this question itself from the screen. 1 minute. Let me just do that. Let me just switch. Okay. Sorry about this. It's just Zoom is really not accommodating what I want very well. So I'm just sharing the question first. Okay. My Zoom keeps disconnecting. I don't know if that's happening with the rest of you also. Okay, now what is it doing? I don't know. Zoom is opening some other window. I don't know what's the game plan. It looks very simple to do these classes, but everybody thinks it's very simple. But the problem is this whole troubleshooting thing is just not all that simple. You require a whole lot of tech for this. Okay, so we are here. You can see my screen, and I hope you can see the questions. So is question 1 visible to everybody? Is my screen visible to everybody? Yes? Okay, great. So I have a question on the screen, and Okay, thanks everyone who replied, because the problem is, to me, I know I have shared it from my end, but I don't know if it's visible to everybody or not. Sometimes it doesn't show me that. So this is a question which we will discuss many concepts through this one question. It's a very simple question. We have the market demand for a good. Okay, now we are coming to week 2 content. This is questions for week 2. And actually, let me also just cover one very small thing before I go to the questions. Yeah, so this reference reading, actually, I forgot to mention this last time. So these are 4 books which I would recommend to anybody who wants to understand this subject overall. So the first 2 books, actually the first 3 books are recommended by Professor Vimal himself. I asked him which book I should refer to for this course, and he mentioned the first book. The first book, it's a very new book, and it's an online free book. Okay, so this is hyperlinked. Okay, if I click on this, it will take me to the website of the book. It's a free book, and they keep updating it also. And this book is actually just useful for some conceptual understanding and for some examples, real world examples. So I don't think they have a whole lot of exercises and questions in it, but I think they do a decent job in terms of explaining it. The only thing with this book is that the structure and the arrangement of content in the book is very different from what sequence we are following. So you'll have to struggle a bit to find the chapters. But it's good for understanding. It's similarly the second book. So if you see your NPTEL portal, there is a book which Professor Vimal has mentioned there, and there is a URL over there, but that link doesn't work. So this is the correct link for that same book, which is mentioned on the NPTEL portal. So again, this is hyperlinked. So if you click on this, it will take you to the website of the book. It's again a good book for theory if you want to understand concepts and examples, some examples. It's a very concise treatment of the text. The third is purely and more like a question bank kind of a book. So for those of you who are, say, suppose in your undergrad or something, or who are planning to study further or something like that, and if you really need a lot of examples to practice, then you can use this book. This is actually like a companion book to Intermediate Economics, Microeconomics by Alvarian, which is also a good book. It's a theory book, but it doesn't have that many questions. So this one, Workouts in Intermediate Microeconomics, it's a really good book, and they have some really good questions. So I have taken up 1 or 2 in the class, and I will continue to include some questions from the book in the class. But I would encourage you to solve questions from this on your own also. Like if you want more practice, if you want to test yourself concepts, this is a book which really helps you build your concepts. So I really cannot recommend it enough, I guess. And the fourth is a very concise book. It has a lot of examples, worked out examples. And the one thing I like the most about this is that they have drawn a lot of demand and supply curves, and they've illustrated it, how they shift with changes like shocks to the market, changes in other factors and things like that. And they've taken many real world examples and they've solved them. So as again, I'm taking some questions from it in the class also, but if you want a deeper understanding, you can refer to the book. It's a really good book. This is actually my first book in microeconomics, and I was really happy. I never needed any other book when I first started studying this book. But I mean, it's a good book for undergrad level. You can't use it for advanced level stuff, but it explains some basics really well. So that is the reason why I also recommend this book. And I'm taking some of the solve examples and other examples from the questions in the class. But if you solve something and you were stuck somewhere from any of these books, you can bring your own questions also to the class and we can try to solve it together. Okay, so this is for the reference reading. Let's go back to the question. So this is the question. This is the demand curve, and then there is a supply curve. Let's see how to annotate this now. Right, this is the demand curve. This is the supply curve. And the price ceiling is 500. We'll come to the price ceiling later, actually. Let's forget about the price ceiling for now. Now, what we want to do is, first of all, we'll come to the shortage. This is actually, I'm coming to the wrong question. This is the same question. Yeah, that's what I thought. This is the same question. I have asked many questions actually. So I went to question 4 first by mistake. So now you can see the supply and demand. First thing we'll do is we'll calculate the equilibrium price and quantity. So how do we do that? Somebody wants to attempt an answer? How will we calculate the equilibrium price and quantity? Any suggestions, ideas? What should we do? No? What happens in equilibrium? What is an equilibrium?
We equate both. I mean,
Sorry, say again.
demand, the equilibrium price is like supply and demand, the consumer demand both become common to attain the market equilibrium.
Right. So when you say common, what do you mean by common?
I mean, common means, sorry, equal.
Yes, it's equal, exactly. So what happens in an equilibrium is that there is a push and pull happening, right? The supplier or the producer will always want to sell it at the maximum price possible. And on the other hand, there is the consumer who will always want to buy it at the lowest price possible, right? I mean, maybe some of you have not been on the supplier side. Maybe you have only been on the consumer side, but at least you can understand that, you know, the supplier wants to recover his cost, makes maximum profit. And as a consumer, we all want to buy everything at the lowest price possible, right? If this coffee mug is available at a really lower price somewhere else, I'll definitely buy it from that person. So what an equilibrium is, the price at which the consumer has said, okay, fine, I'll buy it for this price. And the supplier has said, okay, fine, I'll sell it at this price. And this is not out of some great compassion of his nature. And it's not that the consumer is doing this out of, some sort of doing a favor to the producer. What is the rationale behind this market equilibrium? We've discussed the equilibrium price and quantity, and we've discussed consumer and producer surplus, and we've discussed marginal cost and marginal valuation, right? In the lectures, we discussed marginal valuation in the classes, but in the lecture we've discussed marginal cost also. So what happens with each additional what happens with each additional good in the market for the producer? This cost increases, right? So for I'm not drawing these curves, but just in general, this is the demand curve and this is the supply curve, right? It's just a very rough annotation. Don't go by the proportion of all these things. It's very off. As usual, this is quantity and this is price. So this is supply curve. This is the demand curve. So demand means as price is increasing, the demand is decreasing. And why is that? We discussed this last time. Why is that?
Downward sloping curve because of diminishing marginal return and the
Yes.
availability of substitutes.
Perfect. Yes. So we discussed this last time that we have downward sloping curve because the marginal valuation is decreasing with increase in quantity, right? What is that? We talked about that pizza slice question last week, where you love pizza, you can eat, you think you can eat as much pizza as you want, but after 6 slices, your marginal valuation of it is decreasing, right? Even if you are continuing to eat more pizza slices, if your marginal valuation of the first slice is 300, the marginal valuation of the 7th slice is only like 50 or something, right? That was the question we had last time. So because of this decrease in marginal valuation, as the price, the quantity increases, your marginal valuation is decreasing. Whereas for what happens for the consumer, for the producer, let's decrease sorry, let's delete this whole thing. With every increased unit, his cost is increasing, right? But as the price is increasing, he'll want to supply more and more to recover that cost. If you're selling, 10 units, 10 slices, or 10th pizza, whatever, you'll want to sell it for a much higher price, because the cost of producing 10 pizzas is more than your cost of producing one pizza, right? Say suppose this is one. This much everybody agrees? I hope everybody agrees. I'm not hearing anything, so I'm assuming that that is yes. So there is a, okay, this is too thick. Let me reduce the size of this thing. Okay, so this is demand, right? So at some point, both the producer and the consumer say, okay, both our requirements are met. So at some point, say suppose this number is 5. Consumer is also fine, okay, my marginal valuation of it is more than the price, and the producer is also happy that okay, my marginal cost is less than the price. So at this point, they are both in sync, right? That's technically what equilibrium means, that neither of them is unhappy, neither of them wants to do something other than buying or selling that product. So that is the concept of equilibrium. Of course, Professor Vimal has explained it much better in the class. I'm just recapping it here. So now let's solve this question. This is not a very difficult question, actually. It's a very simple question, but just an illustrative question. So has anybody solved it? What is the answer if you have solved it?
A.
Okay, somebody has said A. Others also, you can actually just type it. Oops, sorry, not this. You can type it into the chat box. Let me open this worksheet. Anyone else? Nobody else solved it? Let's write the equations. Demand is Px is equal to 2000 minus 4q. Supply is Px. Right? This is, we'll come to the price ceiling later. Now, what will we do? How do we solve for it? We just discussed it that, you can just equate the price in both the curves. Okay, somebody has typed in the answer. Great. So I'm glad some people are at least solving it. So it's a very simple thing. 2000 minus 4q is equal to 300. So I know your exam is still very far away, but my personal recommendation for all of you is to please go over the class questions for your exam. No special reason. I'm not outing the paper, but just telling you that it's a good idea to go over all the questions we have discussed in the class for your exam, as it will be really helpful for you guys. Many of the concepts we discussed in the class, you may get a different question, of course, but it will really help because we are going through the exact format in which you're getting questions in your quiz. So this is your q. Now you just substitute the value of q and you can get the price, right? P is equal to, you can solve in either of these. Sorry, somebody is again. Okay, so I think many people have solved it. And is there anyone here who has not solved it? Or who still does not feel like they can solve it? I'm trying to find that. Okay. Somebody is eating. No. Okay. All right. So this is the answer for equilibrium. So far, we have not done anything new in this, right? Just taken the price and quantity. So this is the equilibrium quantity and this is the equilibrium price. Okay. So next question. Let's go to the next question. So far, so good. No questions. Okay. So this is the equilibrium value. I'm just writing that down because we'll solve for many other values after this. This is part 1. Let's go to part 2. Okay, so this is the second part of the question. Forget about the price ceiling for now. Let's just focus on the consumer surplus. So what is the consumer surplus here? How do we calculate consumer surplus? Nobody? It's people had asked a question on this. Okay, this is a different question. Okay. Anybody? How do you calculate the consumer surplus? You can unmute and speak if you want. I'm just checking if I missed anything in the question. No, I've not missed anything in the question. Okay, so I think people are a bit confused here. Let me take a 5-minute break. I just need to get some coffee and then we'll discuss this. So in the meantime, I'm uploading these slides in the Google Drive so you can have the question. I'm leaving the screen shared anyway, but let me just upload this here because this is an important concept and I think it's important that everybody is actually involved. So let me just take 5-minute break here because we're almost at a 1 hour mark and it's a 2 hour class. So I do take a 5-10 minute break in between after 1 hour. So we'll come back and we'll discuss this question. In the meantime, I'm leaving the screen open and just for you know, these are the questions we will going to discuss after this consumer surplus. After that, we'll see what happens after introduction of the price ceiling and what happens to the quantity after the price ceiling. Okay, so these are two parts. You can solve all parts of the question if you want. I've shared the slides in the shared folder. Okay, so just 5-minute break, solve this question and we will come back to it. Okay, so let's get back to our question. Did anybody try this question?
Yes.
Okay, don't give the answer right now. Just post it in the chat box. You can just send me a message if you want, and we will solve it in the class. Just share your answer, whatever everybody got. Then we will evaluate it in the end. Okay, great. Somebody has shared. Anyone else? Only one person has solved it? No? Okay, so you can solve it mathematically also, but I prefer to solve this graphically. And I think even in the lecture, Professor Vimal has also, I think, solved it graphically only. So let's do it that way. Okay, once again, you have to bear with me. My graphs are not the best, but let's hope it's bearable. Okay, so let's map these equations. Okay, this is the equation for demand, this is the equation for supply. So let's draw these two curves. So for q equal to 0, p is equal to 2000, right? So let's say this is 2000. Let me shift this a little bit. Okay, say this point is 2000, this is p, this is q, right? And let's see what's the other equation. The supply curve is sorry, so the other value is q is equal to 2000 by 4, which is 500. Let's say this is 500. Now my curves are not going to be exact, but let's hope they are not too bad. All right, this is the supply curve, and for p is equal to 0, what happens to the supply? Get something in negative. Okay, so hang on, there is screen. I can't see the screen. Ah, okay, here's the screen. Okay, so first let's draw the downward sloping demand curve. For q is equal to 0, p is 2000. Let me shift this 500 a little bit, otherwise it'll be too cluttered. Let's put this as 500. Okay. Okay, this is the demand curve. Let's call it D. And your supply curve starts at, let me look at the equation again. Q is equal to 0, P is 300. Okay, and then it is an increasing curve. So let's draw this like this. Okay, something like this. This is the supply curve. 300 plus 6Q. So this is 300. Why is your screen not updating? Okay, now it's updated. Okay, so everybody okay with this so far? This is what we have done. The point at which we have equilibrium is this point. Can you still see my screen? No, you can't, right? 1 minute. Some Zoom has crashed again. Some stupid problem on this. I'm sorry, my Zoom is just not cooperating for the moment. Now I think it's finally started. Here we can go back to where we were. Yeah. Okay, so far so good. What did we get as the equilibrium price? Where is my slide? Equilibrium price was 1320, and quantity was 170. Okay, so like I said before, none of this is exactly to scale, so don't speak out about that. As long as it is not illogical, we will just work with it. Okay, so this is your P star, or the other way around, since we're following XY. Q star, P star. Okay, so far so good. No issues, I hope. You see the chat. Okay, so what is consumer surplus? On the graph, it is very easy to see, because on the graph, it is just this value, this portion of the graph. Okay. How can anyone, I mean, I can explain, but I think some people got the answer correct, so I wanted them to participate. How do you get this as the consumer surplus? Of course, Professor Vimal has explained it in the class. Somebody else also posted the answer, great. So what you do is that you basically want to see what happens, how many people have a surplus, right? So this is the quantity which is bought, this is Q star, right? This is the price at which you buy it. But there were people who were willing to buy it at 2000, just a little less than 2000 also, right? This many people here, let's take this. So there were some people here who were willing to buy it at maybe a small quantity, but they were willing to buy it at this price also, this quantity, right? Similarly, so on and so forth, you keep sliding down this curve until you reach this equilibrium point. So what we're trying to do is we're taking the consumer surplus of all the consumers, right? Of everybody who's in the market. So maybe there is this one inflection point, you can see equilibrium is the inflection point. At equilibrium, everybody's marginal valuation is either more than or equal to the price, right? That is why it's the equilibrium. But there were many people who had a higher marginal valuation of it before the equilibrium also, right? I'm just erasing this for now because it's just, I don't want the graph to get too cluttered, but I hope the illustrative idea is clear, right? So what we do, now it's very simple. Now that you know it on the graph, it's pretty straightforward. What we do is we calculate this value 2000 minus 1320, right? And we take this Q star value, we take this Q star value, this value, and we calculate the, whatever is the value. I don't know what is the answer. You can check, calculate it and check what you get. Let me just see what it is myself also. I haven't I haven't brought that paper here on which I did the calculation, and I forgot what the answer is you get. So let me see. Yeah, I'm getting a different answer, but I'm sure I'm wrong. So because the correct answer I know is, where is the slide? Where is the slide? Yeah, the correct answer is 57,800. So I think all those of you who got that answer, you have the right answer. I haven't done the whole maths properly, so you can ignore me right now. I'm not solving the whole thing here, but this is how you calculate the consumer surplus. Is that fine? This point, let me just rewrite that. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Anybody have any doubt in this? No, not this, sorry, this. Can we move on? We still have quite a few questions left actually. Okay, so next question is, what happens when you introduce the price ceiling? So again, I'm here, I'm just muting myself for 2 minutes. I just want everybody to solve it first, and then we will come back to this. And let me also calculate the answers in the meantime. I haven't done the maths, but this is the question, and you can see what we are doing. We are doing a price ceiling. Price ceiling means the consumer, the producer cannot raise prices above that value. So in equilibrium, we saw that the price was coming out to be this. This was the equilibrium price and quantity, right? Now we have moved away from equilibrium and we see that the price is lowered to 500, right? So obviously there is going to be some change in the quantity that is traded in the market, that is sold in the market. And what happens to it? Does it increase? Does it decrease? Is there a surplus? As in, is there excess or is there a shortage? We will come to all of that. Okay, so first I just want you to attempt it, because I want you, unless you attempt it yourself, we will not really know how to reason these things. Only when you try to reason, you actually even realize many times that you don't know how to do it, right? So I want you to just attempt it for 2 minutes, not more than 2 minutes. And then I will solve it in the class. Okay, done. All right, I think the screen share has again gone off. I'm sorry, this is just some issue with iPad itself. It's nothing I'm doing. Okay, so how many of you solved it? Can you type in your answer? What is the quantity traded with the change in price when the price ceiling is imposed? Let's come to quantity traded first. Yeah. Anybody wants to share their answer? I'm talking, yeah, Bimlesh, I'm asking the quantities actually sold in the market first. Okay, great. So anybody else who's tried? I gave you 2-3 minutes in which to attempt the question. So even if you have not been able to solve it, it's okay. That's why we have this whole dedicated session, so we can all solve it together, right? So if you have not solved it, it's okay. Just mention it on chat that you were not able to solve it. So I know how many people are not able to solve it. Okay, let's solve it now. So this, let me just write the answer here. Oops, handwriting this. Few people will complain then that my handwriting is not good. So let me write it properly. Oh, you can solve it. This was 557K something, right? So let's come to the third part. I'll add the price ceiling on this itself. So I don't have to draw the diagram again. Okay. So let's see where the price ceiling fits. Okay, so suppose the price ceiling is somewhere here. This is 500. Right. So what happens at 500? Right, this gap is there at price ceiling. Let's call this as PC equal to 500. See, I want to draw this diagram even though I know it's not perfect, because these things you just really understand a whole lot better on a diagram than me explaining it verbally. Okay, so this gap, let's call this delta QC. This gap is what we are calling as some change, some problem with the supply and demand, right? Now, what happens at this price ceiling is that at that price, the supplier is willing to supply only this much quantity, right? He is not going to supply the quantity which we were supplying as equilibrium price. And at that price, the market wants this quantity. See where, I don't know if you can see where my pointer is. This quantity is, this blue dot is what the market wants, and this blue dot is what the supplier is willing to supply, right? So now let's compute this. This is very simple. Now what do? All you have to do for quantity traded in the market is given by supply curve, right? Where is the supply curve? P is equal to 300 plus 6Q. P, we'll put PC because now there's a price ceiling. 300 plus 6Q. I'm calling this QC. Okay. Now we know PC is 500. This will be 33.333 something, right? That's your answer. So that's the quantity which is traded. Let's come quickly to the next question. Shortfall. How do we find the shortfall? Shortfall is what? Shortfall is nothing but the difference between what the market is demanding versus what the suppliers are able to supply. First, let's see what is the market demand. How do you find that? That's the demand curve, right? P is equal to 2000 minus 4Q. Okay, let's leave this as Q only. Let's not change that. Or QD. QD is the quantity demanded, is equal to 2000 minus 500 upon 4. Just trying to make this neat so that people who read it later don't complain. What is this? Just do this by a calculator quickly. You can take the difference of the two and that's your shortfall. Is that clear so far? I'm just doing the maths to do justice to the whole thing. Yeah, so this is 375. And this comes out to be Okay, so this is the answer. This is what we were discussing. Is that clear? Anybody has any questions on this? We can move on to the next question if there's no question on this. So see, here we discussed the effect of a price ceiling. Before that, we were talking about consumer surplus. It's in the same diagram. So similarly, just a point to note, similar to consumer surplus, you can also calculate producer surplus. So this triangle where I've done this purple color hatching is the producer surplus. I didn't ask that question because I didn't want to linger on one question for too long, but that's what this is. Okay, so you can calculate it if you want, and you can see how in equilibrium both consumer surplus, producer surplus are actually positive. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. We still have a few questions to go. You've done all this. Okay, this is a very simple question. It's a conceptual question, nothing to solve. So there is a company which is producing sewing machines. All right, and sewing machines are slightly different based on whether you're making it for industrial use, what they use in textile industry factories, versus what you make it for personal use. Like if I want to own a sewing machine and I want to use it myself, that's a different kind of a machine. So in this question, I've called it type A and type B. Type A is for industrial use, type B is for personal use. Now they are both manufactured in the same factory. So what does that mean? That there is limited space. That the the amount of space which can be given to either of it is limited. Company owns one factory and that's it, right? That is implicit. Unless something else is mentioned, you will assume that space is limited. Now, if there is a sudden growth in the textile industry, okay, I'm not talking about textiles, I'm talking about textile industry, which leads to a surge in the demand for sewing machines for type A, meaning for factory use, where they sew the clothes which we buy. So if there is a surge in demand for one type of sewing machine, what will happen to the supply curve of sewing machines for personal use, which is type B sewing machines? So what happens here? I'll give you a few minutes to think. And you can type your answer in the chat box. Professor Vimal took a very similar example in class, if you remember, if anybody remembers. Anyone? Any takers? Anybody wants to attempt this question? We can draw a diagram also. It's disconnected. Sorry, let me open the slides. I think it's locking my screen, maybe. That's why it's making this nonsense of a thing. Just give me a moment. Okay. Okay, great. 2 people have answered. Anybody else? Let's go to the diagram for this. Okay. Say suppose we had a diagram like this. There's a lag. Sorry, something is wrong. It's not. Thanks for reminding me. I actually completely forgot that I have not recorded it at all. This happens actually when the system crashes and it restarts. I forget to record it. Anyway, thanks for pointing it out. So this time the video will take some time to upload because I will have to stitch the videos together. That takes time. So coming back to the question, so you can see that this is the supply curve, right? So this is given to us. Just even if we forget all these values and everything, what happens when you increase the price of fertilizer? This value is going to decrease, right? You can see just from the simple linear equation, QS is equal to something something minus 20 PF. So if PF is increasing, this quantity here minus 20 PF, this quantity 20 PF is going to increase, means minus 20 PF is getting reduced from the total QS. So just linear equation tells you that there is an inverse relation between QS and PF, right? So if PF is increasing by 1.8, QS is obviously going to decrease. I just wanted to show you like solving, taking the initial value of PF, but I can't find the initial value right now. So forget about it for now. In the class notes that I will upload in the shared folder, I will add that value and I will also update these slides. I've already uploaded these slides in the shared folder, but I'll add in a new version which has the initial value. So you can solve the equation and see for yourself. Like that's all I wanted to do. That you can solve the initial quantity and you can solve for the quantity again with the new price and you can see what actually happens. Okay, so that's that. This is another simpler question. It looks a bit complicated because we have given algebraic values instead of the actual original numbers and things like that. But I'm not solving this right now because this is something I wanted to give for homework. I have put in the options and I wanted everybody to just solve this and see what answers they get. This is again not a very difficult question, just an algebraic question. So, this is the quantity demanded and this is the supply function. So A, B, C, E are given as positive constants and you can derive a relation. So, this is actually, I've given this question because this is a very general, setup. Most of the questions you will get in demand and supply and equilibrium will have this kind of a structure. The demand curve will be some sort of a linear equation with price with a negative sign. Supply curve will be a linear equation with price with a positive sign with some coefficients. And A, B, C, D, E, all these are coefficients. And if you, just doing this algebra, you will get this kind of a habit of finding out. I'm not asking you to memorize anything, just you'll get a sense of, how do you solve for equilibrium, price and quantity. Just gives you a little bit of practice to know how to do it in the general way. Okay, this is the question I wanted to actually spend some time on. And this is the follow-up question, which is part of question 6 itself. So this is the last question for today, and then we'll wrap it up. So now I'm not, because my whole system is crashing over and over again, I'm not sharing my notes, but I will draw a diagram in the shared notes, and you can refer to that. Just for discussion purpose for now, just for a few minutes, let's just spend some time thinking about it. So there's a manufacturer of bicycles, and he has decided to sell bicycles in a new market. Okay, now in this market, what happens, he manufactures these bicycles in batches of 10, right? He makes 10 together, then he makes the next 10, then he makes the next 10. Okay, so that way he's basically procuring materials for one batch at one go, right? So that means that the cost, the marginal cost for each batch for the first 10 is the same, the next 10 is the same, next 10 is the same. Okay, I'm just giving this as a, it's something between discrete and continuous example. We will come to how this thing kind of changes from discrete to continuous. But you can see that this table is basically giving you the marginal cost for producing the ith bicycle. So ith bicycle means for first 10, it's given marginal cost is 4,000. For 11th to 20th, it's 4,200. From 21st to 30, it is 4,500, and so on and so forth. So has everybody understood the question? Is the question clear? What we are talking about? Yes, no, maybe. Is the question clear?
This is kind of frequency table in the batches of 10. So
It's
for
not a
what?
frequency table. It's not a frequency table. It's just telling you that for the first 10, this is the marginal cost. Then for the next 10, this is the marginal cost. The next 10, this is the marginal cost. If you want, I can draw a step diagram for it like that.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So now the question is basically if the market price of a bicycle is 5,700, how many bicycles is he going to sell? So you can type in the answer in the chat box. And then it's another follow-up question is what is the rationale behind it? Like, why would he sell the number you are suggesting? There's a reason why I've taken it in this batches thing. So what is the answer? If the price is 5,700, how many bicycles will he sell?
Definitely, he will not go to 51 to 60 bracket because there.
Right.
So he will stop at the 41 to 50 bracket,
Mm-hmm.
and
So how
because
many will he sell?
10, 10, 10, he will say 10 plus 10, 50. It looks like
50, right?
yes.
Yes, great. So you got it. So basically my point was here that, for that bracket of 51 to 60, the marginal cost is higher than the price. So he's not going to sell anything more than 50. Now in that 41 to 50 for each cycle, for all of these batches, right? First 10, next 10, next 10, next 10. For all of them, the marginal cost is lower than the price, right? So he's going to sell all of them. So he sells the first 10, then he sells the next 10, then he sells the next 10, then he sells the next 10. Then he comes to the 41 to 50 bracket. Now, in that batch, the marginal cost was 5,500. So he's still making a profit, right? The marginal cost is still lower than the market price. So he's going to sell all of those cycles. Why will he not sell them? This is an important logic which has to always be understood in the world of economics. If there is, the producer will always sell the entire quantity he can possibly sell at a profit ever. Okay, that is something. And if whatever is the maximum profit he can make, he will always make that maximum profit. He will not be like, okay, out of 10, let me sell only 5. No, if for all 10 there is the same marginal cost and that marginal cost is less than the price, then he's going to sell all 10. Okay. Some people get a bit thinking a bit too deep that, what if there is not enough this, not enough that, what if market situation is different, blah, blah. What if there is a storm and he's not able to sell? So don't go into that deep thinking. The logic is simple. As long as the producer is able to make a positive profit on something, he will always sell it. And if there is somebody willing to buy, which is kind of given over here that they are willing to buy, so then he's going to sell it. Okay. Unless there is something given to you that the consumer is not willing to buy at this price, blah blah, then you will think about it. But since nothing is given that the consumer is not willing to buy, blah blah blah, you will always want to sell it. Okay, that's the reason why I took this batches thing, because I wanted to explain this very fine logic which exists in the world of economics, which sometimes people who are not coming from a background of economics are not familiar with. So this is something you will always do. Even in game theory, I don't know how many people here have taken Professor Vimal's game theory. As long as you're making profit, you will always you will go the whole 9 yards. Okay. Now, for the 51st bicycle, the marginal cost is more. So he's not going to sell even one bicycle out of that batch, right? So this is the whole logic which we will always be using. which is that the marginal cost should always be less than or equal to price. So there are obviously situations where marginal cost will be equal to price, which is, we'll come to that in perfect competition and things like that. But otherwise, the condition for any producer to sell is always going to be marginal cost is less than or equal to market price. And unless we have given some function, unless we have described something else, we will all kind of assume that the market price is beyond his control. Okay, so we will come to slightly more involved questions, maybe a few chapters later, where we discuss how market price is changing with different things. If you're a different kind of a market structure, but for all intents and purposes, for now, unless anything is mentioned, we will assume that the price is exogenous, that the price is not within the control of the seller. Okay, so price is given as 5,700 means that is what the price is. We don't need to overthink about how they arrived at this price. Okay, now in the same question, say suppose there is a typical buyer. Typical buyer means all buyers in that segment are exactly like this buyer. I know it's not a very rational assumption, but again, this is something we do very commonly in the world of economics. So which is why I wanted to give this example also. Say suppose there is a typical buyer who was willing to buy the cycle for 6,000 bucks. Then what is the total consumer surplus and total producer surplus? So how do we deal with this question? We just did a separate question on consumer surplus. So how do we do this? Anybody wants to? This is a question for homework. I'll just discuss this now, and we will see how many people got it the next time. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts. What do you think? How do you guys will do this? What is consumer surplus?
I mean, in the demand curve, consumer demand curve, anything area above the equilibrium price.
No, that's the mathematical answer. I was asking what is the meaning of consumer surplus?
I mean, the surplus which consumer is ready to pay to extract the value he or she puts on a particular item from the current prevailing prices.
So I think you've answered it, but in a very roundabout way. It's simply, the additional value which the consumer has from buying a product. For example, if my maximum willingness to pay, like if you remember the cup of coffee example I gave, if my maximum willingness to pay for some good, some service is say suppose P dash, and the actual price is P, then my individual consumer surplus is P dash minus P. Right now, for the whole market, you have to see for each quantity how much is the surplus for the buyers. Right, that's why we took that area under the curve, that for the buyers who were willing to pay this quantity, their surplus is this. Then plus one, next come to this. So, I mean, you can do it as an integral or you can do it as area under the curve. And that basically you're just adding up the consumer surplus of each consumer in the market. That's what area under the curve means, right? Because you're taking market demand and you're taking the price. So you have an equilibrium value. So when you take area under the curve, you're basically taking an integral or a sum of this individual surplus of each consumer, and each consumer has a different willingness to pay for that same product, right? So here, what I'm just breaking down that logic, making it a bit more threadbare in this particular example. What happens over here? This is, forget about this is the marginal cost. This is going to decide the producer surplus. This is the market price. Okay, this is the market price, right? Now this is the value, and we are saying that all buyers have a maximum willingness to pay is 6,000 for all buyers. I've just made it very simple. So what happens to consumer surplus? We just know that 50 cycles are sold in the market, right? That's the quantity, and all buyers have the same valuation, 6,000. So 6,000 minus 5,700 is what? 300. 300 into 50 is the consumer surplus. Does that make sense? Did everybody understand what I just did? Yes, no. Someone? You
Yes.
didn't understand? Yes, means you understood, right? Okay, so producer surplus, I just explained 2 minutes ago how we will calculate producer surplus. So I'm leaving this part as a homework for you. Please compute this. And I will post the solution in the notes in that shared folder, which I have linked in the chat box. It's there on the Swayam portal also. So on Swayam portal, you have this live session thing. What do they call it? Problem solving session. There's a link on the left, problem solving session. And they also send an announcement with it. So please look for the link there. If you have not saved it already, please save that link. And you can go over this video again. I will upload it maybe by tomorrow. And then we'll discuss this for those who did not understand it, the total producer surplus. Okay, so I think that's it for today. And
In question
yeah,
five, there is some misprinting. It looks like
sorry.
option. Question 5. I mean, previous couple of questions.
This is in the Swayam portal, are you saying?
No, no. The one you are displaying right now. Question 7. Please go to question
Yeah,
5.
yes.
So this price, there is some misprint. I mean, numerator should be C instead of D for P star.
Okay, I will check the answer. If you are getting some other answer, we will discuss it in the next class. I will solve it again. If there is a mistake, I will correct it.
Yeah, because Q. I mean, we need to equate. I mean, there's no C in the P star. That is what I'm saying.
I understood what you're saying. I'm saying that I will solve the question again and I will post the answer.
Okay.
If there is a
Okay.
mistake in the question, we will discuss it in the next class. It's
Thank you.
possible I may have mistyped it or something like that. So if there is a mistake, we will discuss it in the next class.
Thank you.
So by the way, in week 2, assignment 2 on the Swayam portal, in question 3, there is a mistake. The last part says the market supply curve will be, and after that there is some other garbled text there, Anne and Robert and can information, something got added by mistake. So please ignore that. The question is just still there. The market supply curve will be, and then after that, whatever, vertical line or horizontal line, whatever, blah, blah. Just ignore that extra text in that question. So I think that's pretty much it for now. And so any other questions? Otherwise, next week I will discuss in week 1 and week 2 assignments from Swayam portal in the class. If there are any issues, I'll solve some of the questions maybe. And then we'll go on to week 3 content. Okay. And if you have any other questions you want to ask me, you can post it in the discussion forum. And I read those questions, whatever is posted on the discussion forum. And I will just take that up in the class. For example, if you're attempting some other question on your own and you are stuck somewhere, you can post your question there and we can solve it in class. Okay, so if that's it, we will end the class here. Okay? Okay, thank you. Bye. See you next week.